The doctor didn't waste time with soft words or gentle phrasing. He came into the waiting room with a clipboard and a serious look, and just said it. "Your son needs surgery, ma'am. Today. The infection's spreading faster than we expected, and if we delay, we're risking organ damage." I nodded, too stunned to process it all at once. My 10-year-old son was behind those doors, unconscious, a thin line of sweat clinging to his hairline, monitors beeping around him. I had come in that morning thinking it was just a fever, maybe something viral. But the blood work told a different story. And now there was no time to waste. The problem was the cost. We didn't have that kind of money lying around. The insurance had gaps, and the deductible alone was thousands. I told the doctor to prep him while I sorted the payment. I didn't want my son to wait just because his parents were broke. My hands shook as I stepped into the hallway and dialed my husband. He didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted. "Emergency. Call me now." Nothing. I tried his work number. The receptionist was polite, but confused. "Mr. Ayaz is on leave this week," she said. "He filled out the form last Friday." "I thought you knew." I didn't. I didn't know anything. I called his mother next, thinking maybe he was visiting her, that maybe he was driving to another city or running errands. But her phone was off too. That's when the feeling set in, the cold, creeping kind. The one that starts at your spine and works its way up the back of your neck like a storm. I called one of our mutual friends, Daniel, someone my husband used to work with. "Have you seen Arif?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked anyway. There was a pause on the line. "Didn't he tell you?" he said. "He's on a cruise. Left 2 days ago. I saw pictures on Auntie's Facebook." My breath caught. I checked her profile. And there it was, a photo of them standing side by side on the deck of a luxury cruise liner, sunglasses on, blue water behind them, smiling like the world owed them nothing and everything at once. My husband, the man I had just begged to answer his phone, was holding a glass of champagne while our son lay in a hospital bed fighting a rising infection. The caption beneath the photo read, "Much needed break with my favorite boy. No calls, no stress, just sea breeze and family." I stared at the screen, my hands numb. The doctor's words rang again in my mind, "We can't delay." I was alone in that hallway, surrounded by strangers moving past me like everything was normal, and all I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal. Because it wasn't just the vacation. It was the silence. The disappearing act. The fact that when it mattered most, when our son needed his father, he had chosen blue water and cocktails over blood tests and beeping machines. And I was the one left standing there, searching for answers, with a hospital form in one hand and no backup in the other. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I saw the photo, not when I scrolled through 3 more just like it, Arif lounging in a pool chair, his mother grinning with a drink in hand, both of them draped in luxury robes like they had earned this peace, like they had no one depending on them, like we didn't exist. I didn't cry when I called the hospital's financial office either, and asked what options I had. The woman on the line was kind, but firm. "You'll need to submit payment authorization," she said. "At least half to begin the procedure. We can start with an emergency waiver, but the clock is tight." I hung up the phone and stared at the floor tiles. All I could think about was my son's hands, small, warm, always reaching for mine, now limp against a hospital sheet, attached to wires and tubes because his father decided a cruise mattered more than his health. My chest felt tight, not with fear, but with a rage that had nowhere to go. I'd known Arif could be distant. I'd known he sometimes disappeared into work, or into long silences he never explained. But this? This was a decision. This was abandonment dressed up in excuses I hadn't even heard yet. I texted again. "Our son needs surgery. They need payment now. Where are you?" No answer. I called his sister, she hadn't heard from him either. But she was the one who finally cracked. He said he needed a reset, she said. That you were overwhelming him. That everything with the house and the bills and the stress was too much. I couldn't even laugh. Overwhelming? I repeated. His son's white blood cell count is skyrocketing and he's sipping cocktails in the sun? That was when I stopped waiting. I pulled out the emergency credit card I never wanted to use, the one with the sky-high interest we kept in the back of the drawer for car crashes or disasters or the kind of thing that rips your life apart at 3 a.m. I used it. I signed the papers. I told the nurses to take my son into surgery. And I sat there, alone in the sterile waiting room, staring at the cruise photos on my phone, watching the battery die 1% at a time, feeling something harden inside me. Because in that moment, the part of me that used to defend him, the part that used to believe the best in him, that hoped he'd come around, that wanted to believe his silences were just stress and not selfishness, that part went quiet. Completely. And never woke up again. The surgery took 3 hours. I sat alone the entire time, knees tucked under the vinyl chair, palms pressed between my thighs, staring at the swinging doors that led to the operating room. The hospital lights above me were too bright, too clean, and everything smelled like bleach and fear. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son's face, pale, sweating, breathing shallow. Every time I opened them, I saw that stupid photo of Arif with his arm around his mother, grinning on a cruise ship like his life was finally free of burden. And I realized that I had become the burden. Not our son. Me. To him, I was the noise. The voice reminding him about bills. The woman asking too many questions. The person who dared to feel pain when he pulled away. And somewhere along the line, he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an interruption to his fantasy. It was easier to vanish than to deal with reality. Easier to lie than to sit in a hospital waiting room and face what he helped create. When the doctor finally came out, I braced myself. But he smiled gently. He's stable. We got it in time. I nodded, thanked him, and followed a nurse to the recovery room. My son was groggy, pale, but safe. I held his hand and whispered promises I was no longer sure I could keep. I told him everything would be okay, even though I had no idea what that meant anymore. I watched him sleep, his chest rising slowly, and felt the weight of every decision I had made alone. Later that evening, the nurse asked if the father would be joining us. I said, he's out of town. She nodded, polite but confused, and left the room. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling tiles. Still no call. No message. No apology. Not even a lie. That night, I pulled up our joint banking app on my phone. I stared at the history. 3 large payments to a cruise agency. 1 from our emergency savings. 1 from the vacation fund we'd set aside for our son's birthday next month. 1 from the credit card in his name, the one I never touched. He'd taken it all. Every dollar we had tucked away for the family, spent on luxury suites, ocean views, and his mother's spa package. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft. And as my son slept under hospital lights, hooked up to IVs and heart monitors, I sat beside him, watching a man destroy a family in silence. He came back 3 days later. Walked through the front door like nothing had happened, tan from the sun, suitcase wheels squeaking across the tile floor. I was in the living room, folding the last of the hospital paperwork into a folder marked urgent, with our son resting in the other room, bandaged, healing, quiet. Arif looked at me like I was an interruption in his vacation glow. He set the suitcase down and smiled like he was bringing peace home with him. I needed that, he said, stretching like he'd just stepped out of a massage. You wouldn't believe how clear my head is now. I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just looked at him. He stood there waiting, maybe expecting me to welcome him back, to offer tea or food or small talk. Maybe he thought I'd ask how the weather was, or if the boat rocked at night. But I didn't. I slid the folder aside and said one word, "Why?" He blinked, confused. "Why what?" "You left. You didn't answer. Our son went into surgery and you were gone." He had the nerve to scoff. Actually scoff. "You always make everything sound so dramatic," he said. "It wasn't life-threatening. The doctor said it was just a precaution, right? He's fine now. You handled it. You drained the savings," I said. "The emergency fund. The birthday money. Everything." He shrugged. "I thought we agreed we'd take that trip someday. It was the perfect time. You were so stressed and I figured you'd understand once you cooled down." "I begged you," I said, my voice low. "I called. I texted. I sent you messages from the hospital. I told you what was happening. You didn't answer once." He rolled his eyes. "You always make everything sound worse than it is. You think crying into the phone makes you right?" I needed a break. "You're exhausting. Always talking about bills and doctors and plans. Sometimes I just need air." I stared at him. My husband. The man I'd trusted with a child, a future, a home. And what I saw now wasn't a partner. It was a boy dressed in adult clothes, angry that the world demanded responsibility. His mother had raised him to believe women serve, not stand. That real men flee when things get heavy. And that the consequences don't count if you ignore them long enough. Then his mother called, right there, on video. She filled the screen in a wide sun hat, lounging in what looked like a backyard cabana. "Is she still upset?" she asked. "Honestly, I told you not to say anything. She always overreacts. You're better off not telling her next time. Stress isn't good for the baby." She meant my son. My baby. I ended the call. Right there in his hand. I stood, walked past him to the bedroom, closed the door, and began packing. Not his things. Mine. And my son's. Because I was done begging. Done waiting. Done sacrificing my child's safety for a man who viewed his family as background noise in a life he thought was owed to him. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I packed. Quietly. Purposefully. Every shirt folded. Every sock rolled. My son's stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm like always. I paused only once, in the middle of zipping the suitcase, when I heard Arif muttering in the other room, pacing like the victim in someone else's story. He wasn't begging me to stay, no. He was ranting to himself about how unfair I was, how I made him look bad in front of the hospital, how this is what he got for trying to escape for a few days. I stood in the doorway, suitcase beside me, and looked at him. He didn't even notice. Just kept pacing, kept blaming, kept painting himself the martyr in a war he started. I took my son's hand and walked past him. He finally turned, startled. "Where are you going now?" he asked. "You're really going to blow this out of proportion?" "I'm going somewhere my son doesn't have to beg for his life while his father's tanning on a boat," I said. "Somewhere I don't have to explain to a child why his dad won't answer the phone when he's scared." "You can't just take him," he said. "You mean like you took our savings?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. He looked stunned. Like the world didn't work the way he expected anymore. Like I'd flipped a switch that was never meant to be touched. I stayed at my sister's house that first night. It was cramped, loud, a little messy, but warm. She made tea and cleared out the guest room without questions. My son slept through the night for the first time since the hospital. I stayed awake, watching him, breathing in the silence of safety. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. One to the hospital billing office. I told them my portion would be handled, and they confirmed a relief fund had already been processed after I applied. One to a lawyer. I explained everything. The joint accounts. The vacation charges. The medical neglect. He didn't even hesitate. "You've got more than enough here," he said. "Especially if you want custody." And the third call? That was to a social worker. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just betrayal, this was abandonment. And I didn't need to wait for things to get worse. They already had. I filed the papers quietly, without a fight. I didn't tell Arif until the court date appeared in his mailbox. That was when the messages started. "Can we talk? You're being cruel. You're turning my son against me." But I didn't respond. Because I wasn't turning anyone. I was just stepping away. Sometimes, leaving isn't an act of war. It's the beginning of peace. The court hearing lasted less than an hour. He showed up late, in a wrinkled shirt, looking more confused than contrite. He tried to explain away the vacation, said he thought the surgery wasn't serious, that he needed a mental reset, that I had made it all sound worse than it was. The judge didn't need convincing. The hospital reports spoke louder than either of us. So did the screenshots of unread texts. So did the transaction log showing he used our emergency savings for spa packages and alcohol on a luxury ship while his child was sedated in an operating room. Temporary custody was granted to me without hesitation. And when the judge reminded him he'd still need to contribute to his son's medical expenses, he sighed like it was an inconvenience. I walked out of the courthouse with my son's hand in mine. He was quiet, like he always got when things were big and loud around him. I looked down at him and asked if he was okay. He nodded. Then he asked if we were going back to that house. I told him no. "We're going somewhere better," I said. "Somewhere where you never have to wait for someone to care." We didn't go far. Just across town, into a small apartment near my sister's. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't big. But it was ours. I painted his new room a soft green, filled it with light, and let him pick out new curtains with stars on them. I hung photos of us on the wall, just us. I returned to work part-time and started selling handmade crafts on weekends, just to add something that was mine. Slowly, our days returned to something that looked like life. Weeks later, I got another message from Arif. "Mom's in the hospital. Can you bring Ollie to visit her? She misses him." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was angry. I wasn't anymore. I was just done. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone. My son was building a puzzle on the living room floor and humming softly to himself. That was the only noise I wanted to hear. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are. And if you're lucky, it happens before you waste a lifetime trying to forgive the parts of them that never cared to grow. Arif didn't fail as a husband, he chose to walk away. He didn't forget to answer, he just didn't think I deserved to be heard. And I'm not bitter. I'm free. Because the moment I stopped begging him to be a father, I finally became the mother my son truly needed.